Welcome to this session on the idea of creating a European knowledge data hub. My name is Patrick Child, Deputy Director General in DG Research and Innovation. Very happy to welcome you to this session and also to your participation in the R&I days, where we're really hoping to have a rich and interactive discussion on all of the different dimensions of our research and innovation policy and our preparations for Horizon Europe. I'm very happy on this panel to be joined by such a distinguished group of speakers. And so I'll start by introducing them briefly, and then we'll open up the discussion. So we have Karin As, who is here from the International Cooperation Department of Vinnova, the Swedish government agency that manages the Swedish National Research and Innovation Programme. And we have Lydia Borrell-Damien, who recently taken over Secretary General of Science Europe, and huge sort of experience and track record in the sector. So very happy to have you with us. We have Alessandra Colleccia, who is also recently appointed in her job, but comes from the OECD, now head of Science and Technology Policy Division. So very happy to have her with us. And finally, Jackie Gretsch-Barbara, who is a senior policy strategy and international unit in the Malta Council for Science and Technology. And so, as I say, what we're wanting to do today is to really tease out with you the idea of how can we do better in exchanging information and intelligence for better research and innovation policy, particularly around this idea of creating a sort of knowledge data hub. And so what I'm trying to do with the discussion today is perhaps structure our thinking around two questions. I mean, firstly, if we're thinking about a data hub, a place where we gather together all the information, all the data, all the results that are out there flowing from European research projects, national research projects, what would that look like to make it useful? What would we need to do to get ownership in the community, to really get a sort of a head of steam behind the idea so that it really gets picked up? So what is the need is the first question, and we'll have a first exchange on that. And then the second question is, well, if we've identified the need and we agree it's a good idea, well then, how practically should we go ahead? Who are the actors? What needs to be done? What is the role of the European institutions? How can we build this into our thinking on Horizon Europe? And what's the contribution that other organizations can bring? And we're thinking here particularly of the sort of user community being sort of public policy makers. So it's not a sort of general sort of public information service on what is going on, what is success, what is not success in European science, but it's what we as the community who have our sort of shared ownership of the Horizon Europe program, what do we see as the opportunities and the needs here, and what should we do to take this forward? And I perhaps start by asking maybe Karen and Alessandra, from their perspective, to share perhaps some of the experiences that they have, either from the Swedish organization or from the OECD, in the sort of similar efforts that you may have been making, and then we'll take the conversation from there. So maybe Karen, you'd like to kick us off.
Sure, thank you. Yes, so you said I work at the Swedish Innovation Agency, and we've had quite a long experience in looking at the data and how to visualize it. So we have, I must say, been quite successful, at least if you talk to actors in Sweden or around Europe, in visualizing data from Horizon 2020. And I mean, it's important for policymakers to know what they're looking at, but equally, we think it's important for the actors being involved also know what they're into. So from that perspective, it's important to have a user-friendly tool, and I think our tool that we sort of developed is very user-friendly. And then the actors can themselves analyze their portfolio and doing benchmarking. And we took the success from that story and also launched a national one that we only use at Vinnova, which is much more specific and much more in detail, with the ClickSense dashboard. And sort of building on that, again, we've had discussions with other national funding bodies. How can we combine all types of funding that we do into research and innovation in Sweden? And now we have a pilot called SWECRIS. So it's 12 different national funding bodies within research and innovation that compile the data. And as you said, why do we want this? Why do we plow money into this? It's because, first of all, we want to know, did what we intend actually happen? So we make a program and we put money into it, and did really what we want happen? And then on the other hand, we also want to make a sort of a map out different instruments, where are the need for, where are the gaps, and where are the synergies. And of course, we would like to align the Horizon database to that big database as well. Because I think, as you said, if we can align the national databases, all the national data that we have with the European data that we have, we can really analyze and find the gaps and find the synergies and sort of customize different instruments and activities that need to be done in different areas. So a big yes, yes, yes to the hub.
Okay, well, that's a great start. Alessandra.
Yes, so at the OECD, yes. Do you hear me? Okay. We are doing a lot of different experiments for ourselves. We have a microdata lab inside to produce better evidence-based policies, but for our users community as well. So number one, when we talk about data, I would put together qualitative and quantitative data, and we are acting on both sides. So on the qualitative data side, we have the STEEP Compass. Some of you know about it, and some of you are contributing to it. So this is like a repository of intelligent way of getting information on policies, on STI policies, and the national contents fill it in. And we also have visualization and easy ways, as you say, to navigate. So this is a nice infrastructure. It's actually taken as a big example for the OECD itself on how we should structure and collect information and use it. Then another thing we do, I think almost uniquely, is that because we have to look at data across countries, right? So, and I think one other important characteristic is granularity of the data. So you need to be able to zoom out and zoom in, because averages or macro things are not enough, especially in the science, technology, innovation area. So we do a lot of what we call distributed microdata projects. So we do not have direct access to data, quantitative data that's confidential, sitting in statistical offices, in funding organizations, in ministries, wherever you want. So what we do, we coordinate projects across the world. The researchers that have access, or statistical office that can do research on their own data, we agree on what we want to do. So when you have all this data and data linking opportunities, you actually can look at impacts. So we model what we want to, the questions, we develop the software routines, and we ship the routine to people instead of getting the data at the OECD. So this way, we avoid the issue of confidentiality. We get back things that are not confidential, they're across countries. We get insights from there. So we're applying that to different domains, especially, for example, R&D tax credits at the moment in collaboration with the Horizon 2020 program. So this is, I think, the way to go, qualitative and quantitative, and being able to be granular enough. Of course, we can talk about the challenges.
Good. No, well, thanks. I think that indeed gives us two sort of complementary perspectives. Now, I mean, we have, of course, already been developing some ideas about what this data hub might look like. I mean, the idea being that it would sort of bring together all the information to give us a sort of an overall picture at EU level of research and innovation investments. And so to increase our sort of collective understanding of different priorities and needs, and also to support decision making and policy making. And I guess many of you have seen that we've already launched an online consultation on a first sort of concept of the data hub, and the feedback we've had so far has been sort of in line with, I think, your presentations, relatively positive, with 2 out of 3 people, quite enthusiastic about the idea. But I'd like now to turn over to Lydia and Jackie to see, your thoughts about that. I mean, are we going in the right direction? I mean, is this aiming at a need which you, among your constituencies, sort of also identify? Or are there, other thoughts that you would want to share about what sort of objectives we should set for ourselves? So, Lydia, maybe you start.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that I fully sympathize with the concept and applications that this data hub could offer for Europe and for the world, because I think there is a clear added value in pooling the knowledge of these of the current projects, and especially to identify gaps, to identify further opportunities. Very importantly, interdisciplinary research. It would be a way to identify what new areas need to be developed for the advancement of knowledge. As well, I would like to highlight a point that is, I think, very relevant to the new Commission, which is education. Although I'm not anymore in the European University Association, but that's been a big discussion in a research and education field, how to pool the knowledge of the research funded and the outcomes that come out of these research projects, to transfer that into master programs, doctoral programs, or even bachelor programs. So there should be a knowledge transfer, not only towards industry, but towards education. And there should be mechanisms enabling that in a faster way, because everybody complains how slow is education catching up with the technological developments and other areas of social sciences. But the truth is that there are not enough mechanisms that facilitate that acceleration. This tool could be a means, because it would be about pulling knowledge together that then can be used for educational purposes, as well as all the other research purposes that have been mentioned.
Okay, thanks very much. And I agree with you a lot that the opportunity we have now with the new portfolios in the Commission, and in particular with our future Commissioner Gabriel, bringing together both sort of youth innovation, research innovation, and the universities, creates, and of course the Joint Research Centre, creates a real opportunity for us to work together even more closely than was the case before. But thanks. Jackie.
Okay, so the advantage of going glass is that they all made really excellent points that I can build on. No, I definitely see scope to have an R&I hub, data hub. Allow me to maybe put the small member state perspective in. We don't have a lot of history for policy intelligence. We're one of the newer member states, small member states, so lack of resources. So it would be very beneficial to make use of the knowledge that there is out there. So having somewhere where we could pool these resources together, all this data, the policy intelligence that has been gathered over the years in one place where we could learn from each other and promote policy learning. I think it's something very positive, and I think it will create more coherence on an EU level as well among member states. Of course, it needs to go beyond just a simple data gathering exercise. There needs to be sense making of the data, something that Alessandra mentioned that I liked a lot, the quantitative with the qualitative, making sense to really translate it into then policy practice. It's not just data for the scope of gathering data, but for really policy implementation. Just maybe something to think about and to take care. Something we've pushed a lot in our presidency when Malta held the presidency of the Council is reducing the reporting burden on member states. We're pushing for a lot of streamlining. So the exercise really needs to look at the data that member states already gather and could pool in without adding a burden on member states to look for data that at the moment maybe does not exist. So it needs to be a very intelligent exercise on what type of data as well would go into such a data hub, so as not to continue, burdening administration. So.
Yeah, I mean, but I think there you do indeed put your finger on exactly the challenge, and it's not just for the small member states; it's for everybody. I mean, in order for us to deliver the sort of system we have in mind, that does require a certain sort of investment in identifying the right data, gathering it, collating it, and having a system that makes it work. Listening to you all, hearing how enthusiastically you support the idea. And I wonder, whether that is generally shared in the room. I start to wonder, well, why haven't we got one already? And perhaps that's a way of maybe turning over to the participation. You see, the people here. What are your thoughts on what you've heard? I mean, is it a great idea that we should be seizing with both hands, or what are the sort of things that we should be thinking about? Perhaps in delivering something which is workable. In a way which is actually we can deliver with the resources that we have, but which would actually provide genuine value added and sort of promote a sense of collective ownership among the user community. And I'm putting this question in a long-winded way because I know we're looking for the sort of square microphone thing which we're supposed to chuck around the room to help people to participate, and I haven't seen it. So I don't know whether one of our technicians can help us, or you can use the microphone here. But please, and tell us who you are, and we'll look for the thing.
Thanks. I'm Pekka Koponen from Spinverse Finland. We are innovation consultancy focusing on building projects, especially based on with attracting industry into the European projects. I have two things as an answer at what should be, how to solve a problem. First one is keep the data open. And second one is co-create for specific problems. And one project that I am really fan of is Vinnova Horizon 2020 visualization. And it's not easy to say good things to a Swede from Finland. As you know, the kind of neighboring countries are always the competitors.
It used to be Swedish.
Yes, yeah, I remember. But the point there is that what you did right is that you took a simple problem, specific problem, how to visualize projects and money, and you build it on EU open data. You used, was it the KTH as a co-creation partner? Or?
Yes, we actually used students.
Yes.
So from the education. So there was KTH students who did the visualization, yeah.
So it's difficult to solve a problem if you try to solve everything. So don't make monolithic systems. Cordis is an example of a monolithic system. We all use it daily basis. Nobody loves it. What it tries to do is solve very, very many problems, and that's why it doesn't work. So try spinbase.eu. So it's we launched last week at ICT Proposers Day a tool for finding funding and partners, and what we claim is the most innovative algorithm for matching partners based on your project proposal. That was an advertisement. Sorry.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Can I just react? Or not?
You want to answer?
Can I react?
Of course. Yeah.
No, so I do agree. Open data would be the best of the world. Just to inject that sometimes it's not possible to have open data. So it depends on the problem, on the issue. But again, for example, within a country, so for example, there's an example very nice of Spain. And the corpus viewer, so the Ministry of Research and Innovation that actually can see where the funding goes and the impact of the funding is, because they data linked everything. But of course, this is only open to the ministries and the policymaking community. And it does rely a lot on visualization. So it's like, things that you couldn't see before, now you can see because you can visualize them. That's a perfect example. It cannot be open, but it can be open among actors in the Spanish. So there are a lot of other solutions. So maybe instead of thinking of a huge, big open hub, one can think of interoperable, smaller hubs, different solutions, depending on the type of data you're dealing with.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there are two issues there. I mean, there's the question of openness, and certainly at the European level, we are strongly supporting maximum openness, and certainly within the of the European research community. That's a bit the logic of what we're doing. But then there's also a question of, well, do we want to set up a monster new European system, or can we find some way of federating and bringing together existing very successful models and making them work together? And I think that's indeed a strategic choice. But the way I framed the question, I think, gives a hint of what I think the answer should be. Who would like to come in next? We found the square thing. Yeah. You want to speak? Yep, okay. Anna.
So how it works? This one? Does it work? Or I have to
Oh, yeah.
So this is Anna Ponogopoulou, director in the...
I don't know whether you can hear me. No. No. It has to be like further to keep the mic. So, I would like to ask one question because I'm on the other side of the table working with my colleagues and Patrick and in the European Commission on how to best make available to you the data, to share them with you, not just for sharing the data, but to enable you to take decisions, whether you apply for the calls, in which type of calls, whether there are information out of the results that would be useful for the follow-up of your results, whether it's the best approach for you to take a decision to make the effort to apply for our calls. You need data also coming from member states where there are other national programs that they're ongoing. So there are a lot of issues that probably, before you decide to apply or not applying, to use the results of the projects, to have information about the results of the projects, you need to know. And the question here from me as a European Commission official who would like to know how can best serve the needs of the European Union and your needs as applicants, stakeholders, participants, is how you can think we can better do that. Is it easier for you to go to Vinova, to go to the different OECD, to go to the Commission site and to have information and then to do your analysis and try to identify what is the best course of action for you? Is it better to try to merge and to combine as much as possible information coming from different sources, including the information related to the research and innovation data of research and innovation program? So what we can do from our side to better serve your needs for your daily business, but also what do you think we can do best to support policy making in the Commission? Because research and innovation data are not only there for the next framework program calls, but it's also there as an input for policy making. So that's my question to you, rather than an answer.
Well, thanks, Anna, for reframing this question so eloquently. And so who would like to try and answer Anna's series of questions? I mean, in particular, what is it that you want us to do in order to fill the gap which we've, perhaps heard identified here? I mean, what can we do and what can you do to contribute to this? We can maybe wait for this. Okay, so who? Now, come on. Otherwise, I'm going to. Yeah, please.
I don't dare to throw it. Excuse me. Thank you for doing it, giving the microphone to me. My name is Christine Bunthoff. I work in Wageningen University and Research, and I'm not answering your question.
That's
but
fine.
I'm thinking, there is I kind of miss an intermediate level maybe at the moment, because there is data, information coming from experiments. And then there is a policy question that wants to be science underpinned with how to tackle, how to make a new regulation or how to put in place a policy. So what I think is the gap between data and what can be put in place as a policy. And so I wonder where is the work going on, and I'm very interested in the answers from the different panel members in how to aggregate data make sense of it for policy making, and how to do that. I see that as a big, big challenge, and how is that done?
Did you?
Well, maybe a first reaction to your comment. Thank you for it. I think you have the very right question, and I think that what is normally now starting to be known as research on research activity needs to become more normal, because, as you said, there are many steps to take before you get from science to policies. So, and it's very difficult to do it all in one step. So I think that there is a need to define what are the purposes of the data gathered and organize not only the gathering but the capacity, the finding of data for whether is it for a science purpose or whether is it for policy purposes. I think it's different what a scientist needs than what a policy maker needs. So I think that having we don't need necessarily the same type of data. That would be a challenge to identify what kind of data is needed. But definitely research on research is more necessary.
Thank you. Do you want to?
No, it's a very good question. I would love to hear the answer of it, because it's something that is so hard to do. Even I see on a national level when we come to policy making, translating the bare data, the raw data that comes out into something tangible and something that we can implement is tough. So yeah, maybe it's something for the hub to address this gap.
Yeah, I just want to add to the Spinverse question. I think it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about, as you said, different things. And some parts, like the visualization tool that we developed for Horizon 2020, it's very simple. You just press things. You don't need to read the manual. Actually, you can benchmark yourself towards organizations, or you can look at your country. You can look at Malta and see how is it doing, and which other countries do you collaborate with. So that's one part. The other part of what is really happening in the projects, we're not at Vinnova. We're not there yet. We talk about it a lot. We talk about AI and how to use that smart, because then you have shit in, shit out, and stuff like that. You really need to think about how to develop this AI tool. But for us, as funding agencies together, as I said, we have this SWECRIS with 12 different funding bodies. What we need now in Sweden is really to see, where do we put our money? Is everybody putting the money in the same place or not? So that's what I meant with identifying gaps and synergies. And for us, we put a lot of money into research. And then, of course, we have lots of national money. We need to know where should we put our national money and where is the money from Horizon, for example. So for us, it's really important to look at those aspects. But I think it will be difficult to have just one hub, maybe, because then it's so difficult to use. And I know, being quite technical, the problems that we've had with the tool that we developed that's very visual, is that the data from the Commission is very structured, so that's good. But it's from the access, so there's no API, for example. So it takes a lot of manual work every time there's a new release. There's lots of manual work, and I really have to fight for us to keep this, because we have other more sophisticated tools at Vinnova, but those tools are not used by other European colleagues or by the more. It's not less sophisticated, but with people who are just interested in knowing who do I collaborate with? What does it look like? So I think we need to keep different layers, so it's easy for everybody to use it. So it's more. So the dashboards are not easy. You sort of get lost in where are you actually. And then I think it's also important. The Commission has been really smart, I think, because you have research and innovation actions, you have innovation actions, you have Marie Curie, and you have ERC and whatever. At Vinnova, we have projects. So when we try to pinpoint them and to make them, I mean, to compare, it's difficult for us to see this is within this area and this research. So I think, and that's the problem if we need to pool everybody in Europe, how to classify the data. It's very difficult. And also when you collect all the data, some of us have APIs, so it's very easy. Otherwise, you have PDFs, and you have to. So it's those tricky questions also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
Maybe I would like to add, to give another example, which would be more oriented towards policy. Let's take the example of research infrastructures. For example, Science Europe is now developing an activity together with the OECD Global Science Forum regarding the optimization and operation and use of research infrastructures at national level. Well, the first challenge is to get the data. Just simple as that. It is a challenge. We are doing it, but it is not like you put your questions and you get the answers. The answers come in all shapes and forms. You need to give a proper structure to the data in order to codify it properly. So that's just to illustrate how difficult it is.
And before you know what type of data you're going to get, it's hard to structure it. So it's a bit of a
it's like
learning.
It's a learning
as to how
progress. It's a learning process, but yeah, just to illustrate that.
But before we get to the
we are in the
challenges of how do
infancy.
we do it, I sort of have a sense from this discussion that we're not necessarily all on completely the same wavelength about what it is that we want to do, right? But Alessandra,
So yeah, the tool you want to develop depends on the question you're trying to answer. So the question of innovative funding is, I think, is a question that most everybody wants to answer. Okay, where I'm investing money, where the money is going, what kind of impact it's having. So for that type of question, something that would be really cool to have is to have a funding agency sharing data. Now, what are the incentives for that? How good quality is data in the sense? It's not that it's bad quality, but again, is it well structured? It's administrative data. It's not fit for analysis. So what kind of taxonomies one could build across different countries in Europe or outside to catalog that data? The unit of analysis is oftentimes the project. So again, there is a lot of work can be done, and digital technologies are there to give us the tools to do that. So it's not so gloomy. There is a lot of work out there that can help. There are a lot of organizations that are developing standards, the unique, pervasive, persistent identifiers to be able to tag every single data information, whether qualitative or quantitative. So that's the whole community. So it's a question also of putting together the whole community. So that's the funding question. But there can be so many other questions. So as a policymaker, you want to evaluate the particular instruments, policy instruments. So again, in the case of R&D tax incentives, which we have experience, you have to collect years and years of design information of the instrument and to see how it changes in every country, and then you have to collect data on foregone tax revenues from the finance ministries. So only with that, and we have now the database, qualitative and quantitative, can help you to see where you are. Of course, that's an international comparable basis. When you're at home, you even have access to more granular data than that. But at least you have a way of seeing what kind of data you need to build to be able to answer that particular question. It would be great to go and see what other policy instrument it's really expensive, or the main in Europe that I want to build an infrastructure around, because I want to be able to evaluate it at the end of the day. And the international dimension is very important because a lot of these fundings and all of the instruments now are transnational. So it's really important to capture the dimension across the border.
Yeah. No, I think, if we even were in a position to have a sort of accurate and comparable mapping of what is happening at European level and what is happening in each of the member states at national level in comparable areas, we would see a very big step forward, right? I mean, we would then indeed be able to sort of see where there were potential overlaps, opportunities for collaborations, or different things. And there is some experience in the Commission in the area of external assistance, where the development program of the EU has been sort of mapped together with the development programs of member states, and we come across exactly the same issues. That some people are a bit nervous or squeamish about declaring all that they're doing or what they're not doing, or hide behind data incompatibility and all these things, or the cost of actually complying is too much for some administrations. So but there the question I think is an easier question to answer. It's well, if we're talking about the EU's commitment to the Congo, what are we doing at European and national level together in the Congo? Whereas here we're talking about a much more multidimensional and perhaps more complicated picture. And the question is, are we sure that the objective we're aiming for is the one I just described, or that is knowing basically what's going on across the piece and being able to learn from that? Or are there other agendas that we are getting distracted by?
I think, I don't know, but I think we're just being distracted a little bit by talking about money and funding. So what we're actually asking for is impact, of course.
Yeah.
And that's where I said about the AI. I mean, we have the technology to look at the final reports and see what is actually, if we invest, do we actually get something? And of course, we get a lot of projects, and that's what we can look at. We have sort of invested in these types of areas, and we have all these types of projects. But what we would really like to know is, did it really matter? And that's sort of the next question. So we tend to focus on, I think, on money.
On inputs and not enough on impact. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Agree.
Now, well, what are the reactions in the room? Any thoughts? Please.
Hello. It's Peter Mason. I work at Universities UK. Following on from that point about projects and outputs, one of the things that we've found through research that we've commissioned is, so speaking as an organisation whose objective is to create opportunities and support further internationalisation in the UK sector, is how much research collaboration happens outside of funded projects through research budgets. And I think that's a really interesting point for this discussion, to have a holistic, as far as our objectives as an organisation are concerned, it would really help us to have a better understanding of where international collaboration is happening outside of funded projects and where it's being funded by institutional research budgets. We find that extremely useful. A second point which I'd throw in, at Universities UK we have a long-standing piece of work around responsible metrics and the use of responsible use of metrics, and I think that's a really important point to consider at the outset for a project like this, is to think about how will this data be used, and not so we don't find ourselves in a position down the line where we have to respond to concerns from the research community about the use of these data. About the use of these data.
Thank you very much. Good point. Someone else from the room? Someone from the panel like to react?
Yeah, I think you raised a very important point. I would like to add, the responsible use of the data should be that. So I would also like to add another factor. So a lot of these solutions, technological or data gathering, are occurring in the private sector, let's say. So sometimes public sector or governments end up paying for their own data, or there is a lot of publicly funded data for research that it's in the private hand because they have figured out a business model to curate the data, which is costly. That's fine, and so they have revenue streams out of it. So when you start thinking about this problem, you really have to think ex ante how you manage this relation so that you're not locked in solutions that you cannot deal with afterwards. Yeah, the data is something that creates, the markets for data can create restrictions of access or in sharing and so on, and competitive stances that we need to deal with. So we're also working, for example, on OECD recommendations on publicly funded data for research. It's very important that that's research, and publicly funding data is a public good and should be shared freely.
Thank you. Any other reactions from the panel? I mean, does that sort of take us a little bit into the sort of second set of issues that I wanted to sort of tease out a bit, which is, if we sort of basically agree that the idea of a data hub is something that, in principle, we think is a good idea, and, taking account of some of the experience we've already heard about, well, what has been holding us back? What are the challenges, whether it's the sort of cost of compliance or the sort of uncertainties about how the data will be used, or some of the issues you've made, or the incompatibilities in national systems. I mean, what's the experience either in the panel or in the room about, what we should be thinking about if we, are going ahead with this idea, as to, what are the likely sort of hurdles along the road that we are going to have to address, and how can all of you, as potential sort of stakeholders in this project, sort of help us to overcome those? Who would like to start? Jackie.
I'm thinking. I think one of the main challenges will be framing the question so that there is no duplication. Alessandro already mentioned the STIP Compass, a big exercise that the OECD already does, which has a wealth of information and already does a lot of policy intelligence there. Vinnova, you focus a lot on the funding. So there is already a lot of work there that is accessible to member states. I know I use the tool a lot, even to see where Malta is on the sense of participation in Horizon. So we really need to be careful to develop a tool that is unique and that really can provide an added value to the European community and hopefully global community. So that's one thing. Secondly, the openness of data, which people have already mentioned. It's a concern always that, okay, we as a European community, we always go into these things very openly and willing to share, but then we have the global competitors. I mean, what about the third countries? How are they going to participate in this? How open can we be with asking our agencies to share the funding with then third countries? So I think also the policy question really will have to be address all these gaps.
Yeah.
Can I just say?
Sure.
The STIP Compass is a joint initiative with the Commission. Yep. So I mean, all the European countries, even the non-OECD ones, are already included in that. So it's the infrastructure is there. It needs to be potentiated. And so if you look at it, is this granular enough to answer your question again? So that's for example, that's at national level. Is your question or your instrument instead set up at the regional level, at the federal level? I don't know. We don't have that dimension yet. Is that important? Is that important for Europe? So that's one area, one direction. And so on. So that, I think, it's already a joint initiative on which we could build, but that's only for qualitative type of information. Then you have to say, okay, is that enough for me? I need more integration with quantitative data.
Yeah, maybe I may add, also building on the question by Peter Mason, which is a very fair point. I think that the definition of the problem, of course, is absolutely necessary, but then the data and the metadata so that we can contextualize properly the data and ensure a good use. I think that this calls for ever rigor in the analysis of data, because it could be easily either instrumentalized or kind of perverted or misused, or just being used to serve certain interests. So I fully agree that perhaps in this context, small is beautiful, meaning starting with small tests here and there to test how a system can be robust enough to trust the outcomes of the analysis, it is appropriate.
And I think, in addition to trust the outcomes, you also have to understand and find. Because I think one of the biggest challenges when you try to put everything in a hub is where you're lost in the maze because you don't know where you're going. So I think that's the beauty of when you try to keep it simple. But of course, if you have it simple, then you don't get. Then it's not enough. Then you're not satisfied. So I think it's
in between.
It's something in between, or something, or maybe. If you're technical again, if you have a dashboard, then you can have all these apps, and you can. But you really need to know where you are when you're in this big data ocean, so to speak.
But again, it's this macro and micro view that you have to have.
Yes,
so it's good to have the macro, and then you
Yeah.
want to zoom in, and so you say, okay, that's the problem, I want to zoom in. That's the most common problem across all the European members, and I want to solve that problem. And let's do a demonstration case, a smaller case, if I wanted to build an infrastructure around this particular problem. Then if it works, we go to the next one.
I'm just a bit afraid that because we discussed now and sort of if you analyze this and so you have to be an analytic to understand what you're seeing, because I think the beauty of having a tool for R&I policy is that you don't have to be you don't have to be an analyst. To do that, you can actually be someone who's really interested in policy or a specific question, and then you can sort of take it out. And I think that's for me a key point.
Okay. I think we have a question here. Come on. Throw it.
My name is Sean McCarthy. I'm from a company called Hyperion, but I'm also a professor in University College Cork. And in UCC, what I do is I design training courses for scientists, for researchers on a whole range of non-scientific things. And one of them is on European policy. Now, if there's any subject you want to get a scientist to fall asleep on, it's European policy, and they wouldn't come to the groups and so on. So that didn't work, okay? And the research that we're doing was so relevant to the policy debates on renewable energy, e-health, humanities, the whole lot. So I changed my tack. So I said, we're not talking about European policy. The question we had was, who wrote your topic? So they were doing research and they were reading work programs. That's a great question. So I explained the policy debates behind them and so on, and they understood the background to the topic. And now the impact question became very clear. The next question we asked them is, who took your money? In other words, who's already doing research in this area? They said, that's a great question. And then they started analyzing this, but the end result is they ended up each producing for their area something called a policy intelligence report. And suddenly they're now talking to COREPER, they're talking to units in the Commission, the EPRS in the European Parliament, things that were completely voodoo to them before. So the point I'm hearing here, producing the data and the tools is all very difficult to see an impact unless the scientist who's working on the project has the fundamental, the basic understanding of policy making, and when they do it, they love it. They actually love understanding this kind of thing. So I think all the tools are there, but unless we can develop the kind of skills of the scientists who are in the project, and I think the Commission has a great opportunity that every project that's funded, like the impact of the project on policy, using it as a mechanism of developing the skills and understanding, which you take for granted. But in the research and community, it's still a bit of a voodoo area. So I think that's one of the things that has to be addressed, maybe through Marie Curie programs or something, that understanding policy has to be part of the training within projects that are funded by the Commission.
Thank you. No, good points. Any other thoughts? Yeah, please.
Does this work? Yeah. This is actually Finnish innovation originally, by the way.
Congratulations.
It works now. So I'd like to make a proposal on kind of one idea how to move this forward. And I repeat my earlier remark, which is don't try to make a monolithic data hub solving everything and not even collecting all the data, but even think about initiatives, how you activate this open data and co-creation activities all around Europe. And a simple example, take the EU data API or way of structuring funding, partners, past projects and the data, what is now being used in the funding and tenders portal, and implement that at all national and regional funding agencies around Europe. And this way you can get fast access for the industry, anybody who wants to kind of activate work to help bring better projects. But thing is, the most important thing is that API is not perfect, but don't try to redesign and make a better one, and just do it, and then improve later.
Okay. But how do we then get all the national and regional authorities to accept that?
You are the European Union, you tell them to.
No. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the purpose of this discussion. We're doing co-creation. And I'm going to now, sort of try and wind this up by asking our panel members to be give us answers to two questions quickly. The first question is, listening to this discussion, taking account of what you've said, what is the most important recommendation? If you were asked to make a response to our consultation on the data hub on a postcard, not on a 10-page document, what would be your top-line recommendation? And then, perhaps even more importantly, in this spirit of co-creation, how would you advise us to take the conversation forward? Because I just bringing together, as we usually do, representatives of all the EU member states and saying, right, it's going to be like this from now on. Although traditional and maybe accepted up to now, isn't the best way actually of devising a system which sort of generates a real sense of ownership and investment by all the stakeholders. So what should we do? And who should we bring together to take the conversation forward? And what's your advice to us on that? So, Lydia.
Well, first of, may I say two?
You may say two, since you're the first.
One, define the purposes,
Yeah.
define the problem, what you want that for. Second, bring experts together. First, so bringing on the point of, bring those who know about it, those who have already done something about it, and learn from it.
And you think that group of people is sufficiently clearly identified?
No.
Well, we've got a group here, good group of people.
I think there should be some work in identifying them.
And so who's going to do that?
You. Commission.
Okay.
That you could do, I think.
I don't know, we'll see. Jackie.
One recommendation, one word.
You have one side of a postcard, huh? Or a
one word
tweet
with a little picture. Impact.
Yeah.
Always when you're creating a new tool, you need to see what impact it's going to have on both itself as a use, so making sure that it is of added value and have an impact, and the impact it will have on member states, and that is how the difficulty in roping them in. What is the win-win situation? So you need to really offer something that they don't already have, or else you will not have that spirit of enthusiasm to really participate in something like this. Regarding the actors, definitely what Lydia said, you really need to surround yourself by a group of experts who really understand.
Yeah, but expert is a word which we use with great sort of liberty and sort of, But if you were going back to your office and I asked you to come back with me, tonight, and we will work together on a list of people now to take forward this conversation, who would those people be? What's your sort of top 10 list? Not the individuals, of course, because what are the target groups?
People experiencing actually building similar hubs. So you have two already here.
Yeah.
On the table around the panel. Us probably less so, but you really need to surround yourself with people who have already done it, so that you can learn from the mistakes made and build on the success.
Okay.
And also,
I'm sure you can find university experts.
Exactly.
We're very good at that.
But also the member state perspective is important.
Experts in member states to have done that.
Exactly.
Well, you have here a couple of, just to start.
Yes.
So they should be in your expert group.
Okay.
And the member states that to understand what kind of data they can provide it's used as building a tool that no one can provide information
Exactly.
for. So you
No,
also
we
need
can
to surround
design a
yourself.
marvelous system,
Exactly.
and then we come along and say to the member states, right, now you've got to provide this, you've got to provide that, and then
tell you how,
the answer
where,
will be,
when.
well, very interesting, but have you thought to,
Yeah, maybe in 10 years.
Okay,
So that's
okay,
something
that's
important.
good. Alison.
So we've been doing a major study on digitalization of science innovation policies initiatives. So we're about to finish and complete. So we have studied these initiatives in 60 different initiatives across countries. So there you would have the overview of how each nation, a government, is organizing itself, its data infrastructure, using digital tools for policy making. That's a good starting point to see which country, and we have in-depth case studies on Norway, but we have a little bit the overview. So you have that. Then my recommendation would be do not think about a hub, but a hub of hubs, because there are a lot of hubs that work, and because the data landscape is very heterogeneous, open, semi-open, confidential, and the actors' landscape is very heterogeneous as well. So the key is not think about communities around problems. So again, if it's a question of developing standards, there are a lot of communities around there. So as long as they are put together, if it's a question of wanting to have an open data infrastructure, then you work with those organizations that are really doing that. Lens.org, Microsoft Academic. I mean, there are lots of organizations that are doing and finding ways of sharing data. So if that's the objective, those can be easily identified.
Okay, thank you very much.
Call us. No, but I think one way is actually to use, as you said, use the ones who've done it, and I would suggest that we could. We have lots of people, as we know, are doing this, and build on our national Swecris pilot that we have, because we in sort of a minor way face all these types of challenges, and I think the structured data is very, very important, irrespective of whatever. If you're funding or whatever, it has to be structured in a way, and if the Commission can't tell everybody how to do, and globally maybe the Commission doesn't have that much power, but OECD probably have much. I mean, you can use other types of ways of classify projects and to classify and decide we're going to look at this and this and this. So maybe that's a way to do it. But I also think that since, for example, Vinnova we're doing this all the time. Now we're trying and we fail and we succeed so use us. Okay. I can even give you names.
Okay, good. Well, look, I think we're running out of time, and I think we've had quite a lively discussion. So I thank in particular the panelists for their very sort of constructive and proactive inputs. Thanks to the audience members who've contributed, and I hope that this does set the basis for a future program of work which will actually deliver something which will make a difference to all of us. I won't try and summarize the whole discussion, but some of the things that I've heard which I think are important are what you said, don't try and recreate a monolithic system, make good use of what exists, think about impact, not just funding, think about the links with policy and policy making, not just doing this in an abstract way, and helping us to identify the relevant actors in this story, whether it's people who have experience like you, practitioners who've done it, or the potential sort of user community, and I use that in a very broad sense, and it needs to be a conversation involving all of these people. So thank you all very much. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for participating after a long day, and I hope that the rest of your participation in the R&I days is as exciting and proactive as this has been. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.